Today we are looking at the code of conduct of relationship. Now, when we talk about code, we're talking about a set of values, rules, standards, and principles that guide people's behavior in an organization. And now, for the purpose of this teaching, in a relationship, it could be a relationship between husband, wife, friendship, courtship, parents, children, employer, employee, whatever level of relationship, the guiding principles, standard rules, and values that govern that relationship is called the code of conduct. And I want us to understand that any relationship or organization that lacks a code of conduct will not make the most of the people in it. The people in it might not even get the best out of it. Take, for example, the code of conduct for an organization, a workplace. Anywhere you're working expects you to have to be committed, expects you to be loyal. Any place you're working expects you to respect the confidentiality, not to spread things or things about the organization anyhow. Any place you're working expects you to be punctual. Punctuality is a code of what conduct. It's on and on. So I want us to understand that even in relationship, once you get into relationship, as long as you have expectations, there are code of conduct. There are things you expect to happen or values you expect to see in whatever relationship you are into. Take, for example, code of conduct in relationship. We talk about, I'm going to mention some code of conduct. I will mention some codes of conduct in a relationship. And part of the code of conduct you find in relationship is loyalty. Loyalty, or call it commitment. Being there for whosoever you're relating with. Not talking down, or talking, backbiting the person. Being real. Whatever you are in presence of the person is what you are behind the person. That's loyalty. And so loyalty or commitment is a code of conduct. Respect is another code of conduct. Love is a code of conduct. We have trust. Faithfulness is also a code of what? Conduct. Anybody getting into a relationship should have this as values, should have them as rules, should have them as standards, and as principle, guiding principles to make sure you don't hurt the people you're relating with. I've mentioned about 4. Faithfulness is a code of conduct. I have about 13 of them here. Honesty, transparency, or call it integrity, is a code of conduct. You can't be in a relationship and not be real, where you're fake, you're lying, you're living a lie. I mean, once you live in a lie, you're breaking the code of conduct of any relationship you're into. Kindness is a code of conduct, treating the people you're relating with well. Anybody going into a relationship, the more intimate the relationship gets, the more the person wants to be well treated. So kindness is a code of conduct, or call it sensitivity to a person's feeling or the needs of the people you're relating with. It's a code of conduct. It's a value anybody getting into a relationship should have. Then we have team spirit. Yes, oneness. Team spirit. You can call it esprit de corps. Once you are in a relationship with the person, the more the relationship gets intimate, you begin to have that thing that the person should work as a team with you. You start expecting the person to work together with you to accomplish purpose, accomplish goals. You begin to have expectations where the person will be supportive and stand with you. Then we also have code of conduct, humility. It's a very important code of conduct because you need it to be able to learn from whoever you're relating with. Anybody that is proud will kill a relationship. Why? Because you won't have the capacity to learn. It's humility, being humble, that gives us the capacity to do what? To learn. And then we have also discretion, call it confidentiality. You find that the more intimate a relationship gets, the more vulnerable the person you're relating with becomes with you. The person begins to let down guards, begin to feel very free, and begins to become vulnerable. The person doesn't hold back. Now, one of the code of conduct is that you are not permitted to be announcing the vulnerability of that person to the public. It's confidentiality. It's called discretion. You mind what you say. It's not everything you will now see that you want to talk about. It's a code of conduct that be respected if you want to maintain relationship. Another code of conduct is freedom of expression. Now, the truth is, anybody who's in a relationship that he or she cannot freely express himself, be it out of fear or whatsoever reason, that relationship will not last. Part of the code of conduct of a relationship is that when you are out there, you can just lock up yourself. But the moment you get in with a person you call a friend, a husband, a wife, parents or children, the moment you get into a place you call friend zone or home, what happens? You should be able to express yourself freely. If you are in a relationship where you can't express yourself freely, there's something wrong. The code, one of the code of conduct is being broken. The Bible says perfect love casts out what? Fear. So you should be free to express yourself in any relationship you are into. And then high sense of responsibility. Every relationship carries what? There are expectations. No matter how humble you are, no matter how Christian or how you feel you're very, very humble and you don't have much. No matter how much you don't have much expectation, you still have some expectation. So there's anybody going into relationship should have value of being responsible. I actually say when you get into a relationship, you're actually taking up responsibility for another person's destiny. So you don't toy with that. You don't toy with that. So what? Having a high sense of responsibility is a value, is a high code of conduct. And then another code of conduct, no tit for tat, no vengeance. If you are a person who do me, I do you, tit for tat, I can tell you that it will be like breaking, you're actually breaking the code of conduct where you want to venge with
online now, I connect more.
Hello.
You can carry on.
Okay, I can carry on. Thank you. Thank you. So put it this way: if you look at the summary of the code of the codes, I've mentioned about 13 here, and it can be more and more and more. The general summary of all of the codes of conduct, it can be found in the passage of the Bible, Proverbs chapter 17, verse 17. It says, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. And for me, that scripture means remaining consistent even when situations change, being there for each other in the good times and in the bad times. And I want us to understand that the Bible is full of codes of conduct for relationship. Take, for example, the 10 Commandments. That's God's code of conduct for his relationship between us and him and between us and other people. God gave that code of conduct. You shall not have any other God besides me. You shall not kill. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not covet your neighbor's property or wife. All of these are codes of conduct God gave for us to be able to live life and relate better with each other. Then that can be found in Exodus chapter 20. Then Paul also came on board and gave some code of conduct in Romans chapter 12. Oh, please take time and read that. You see a lot of code of conduct. That's where Paul says, don't be vengeful, repay evil with good. Don't do tit for tat. Love people as much as is possible. All of these are codes of conduct for what? For a relationship. Then Jesus also gave some code of conduct in Matthew chapter 23. Now listen, the whole Bible is a manual of codes of conduct on relationship between God and man, and between people generally, between husband and wife, parents and children, between friends, between employer and employees. You just name it. The Bible is a manual of code of conduct on life and relationships. So I beg you, read it, eat it, and do what? Live it. Having said that, I want us to understand that every lasting relationship, every relationship that must last, the people getting in there must get in prepared to respect and maintain these codes of conduct I've mentioned: loyalty, love, respect, faithfulness, unity. Depending on our various values, because depending on our values, we still have some expectations, and then we can draw up our codes of conduct. Take, for instance, we are talking about a codes of conduct or relationship codes of conduct. Take, for instance, loyalty. Loyalty. Let's look at loyalty. I'm saying that's why because there are written and unwritten codes of conduct, and people have various expectations when they talk about codes of conduct. Like I said earlier on, depending on your level of relationship, depending on your values, depending on your rules, the codes of conduct kind of change. But some of these things I've mentioned must be there. Now, let's take loyalty for instance. That is having a strong feeling of support and allegiance to somebody. As loyalty means somebody standing with you and for you. That's loyalty. It means somebody defending your interest, speaking well of you, even when you are not there. A loyal person is not loyal not just in your presence. A loyal person is even committed to you behind you. A loyal person will not talk down on you. And I want to say the truth is that one code of conduct that people aspire and desire when they come into relationship is loyalty. Loyalty is a very strong code of conduct people look out for. But now I want to ask some questions now. We are talking about relationship codes of conduct now. I'm going to be asking us some questions. It's a workshop to test our values, our standards, our rules or principles when it comes to our various relationships. I've talked extensively. So what are your rules? What are your principles? What are your values? Because you draw up your code of conduct based on these 4 factors. Your values, which gives birth to your rules. Your rules now helps you to have standards. Your standards now also help you to have what? To have principles. Based on your values, you have rules. And based on your rules, you have your standards. And based on your standards, you now have guiding principle. Take, for example, if your value is honesty, if you have honesty as a value, your rule will be that I will never be dishonest. Then your standard is I will make sure I am straightforward no matter what. Your guiding principles, I won't hang around or put myself in a position where I would have to lie or be dishonest. I hope you're following here. So that's exactly what happens. That's to say, if you lack values, having rules or standards or principles becomes very difficult. Anybody who lacks value might have problem respecting the code of conduct of any relationship. So having values in life is very, very important. So quickly, get your pen and paper out. I'm going to ask some questions to test your value. We are talking about relationship codes of conduct. Are we ready to do that now? Are we ready? The code of conduct of relationship. Quickly, let's get a pen and paper out. We want to ask some questions. So question number 1, would you go out with your friend's ex? Do you see anything wrong with going out with your friend's ex? I would have loved to get 1 or 2 feedback. Do you see anything wrong with going out with your friend's ex? Would you employ someone your best friend sacked? Okay, somebody give me an answer. No. Okay. Now, should you accept gifts from your ex as a married person? Should you accept gifts from your ex as a married person? Okay, somebody give an answer here. I think it's wrong to go out with my friend's ex. Okay, that's someone's opinion. Okay. Then somebody else said no. That's it. He or she will not go out. Now I'm getting answers now. Is it to question number 1? I think let's go I'm on question number 3. Would you accept gifts from your ex as a married person? Let's get answers to that. Would you? Somebody said he can employ someone his best friend sacked. Another person, well, as for gift, it depends. Now, okay. Somebody said, no, mommy, I can't accept such gifts. Someone said it depends. It depends on what? Yeah, while we are waiting for that, let's go on to the next one. Should you spend time chatting or visiting your ex? Another person said accepting a gift from my ex is a no. Should you spend time chatting or visiting your ex? Somebody says no, not supporting chatting with, ex. Okay. Now, should you talk down your spouse or fiancé or fiancée behind him or her? Should you? Okay. Someone said never talk down on your spouse. Okay. Now, should you listen more to your spouse or others? Should you listen more to your spouse or to others? Someone say listen more to your spouse. Okay. Someone still concord to that. Listen more to your spouse. Your spouse should be your best friend. Okay. Before I go on, let's take a break. Let's talk a little about all of the questions I've raised. We all seem to have given very sound answer. Would you go out with your friend's ex? I've asked all of these questions why, and we all seem to have given right answers. But you see, many relationships are having issues because people get into relationship and don't respect this code of conduct. You shouldn't be in a marriage and be spending your time chatting up your ex. But people are doing it. And some are doing it in reckless abandon. It's an unwritten code of conduct. You can't be married and be chatting up your ex, spending more time calling up your ex. Or you have difficulty and you need someone to talk to, and you're leaving your spouse and calling up your ex to talk to. Why? Because you're my ex, we are really very good friends. It's an unwritten code of conduct. You don't do that. It's wrong. It's wrong. Now, someone said, okay, can you employ someone your best friend sacked? I'm deliberate about that, your best friend. If that person is your best friend, that person, your best friend must have discussed with you, assuming, I'm making that assumption, on whatever must have been going on between him and that staff, and that your best friend now sacks the staff, you take up the staff your best friend sacked. Meanwhile, you and your best friend, maybe you must have talked about it. It's your best friend, It's like, take for example, let's come down. Let's look at it this way. Someone said that your spouse is your best friend. Now someone hurts your spouse. Are you getting me? And your spouse is really upset and angry with the person. And you look at your spouse and say, well, you might be angry with this person, but I can't stop talking to this person. Hello, are we still on board? You see, why am I saying this? There's some unwritten code of conduct that, depending on the level of intimacy you have with a person, there are some moves that person makes that the person has expectation. Now, put it this way. You swap and put yourself in the person's position. Would you like for your best friend to take up a job or employ somebody you sacked? Would you want that to happen? Would you want your best friends to do that? Would you want your spouse to receive gifts from the ex? Would you want that? Why am I saying this? There's this unwritten code of conduct that we must learn to respect. when it comes to relationship, when it comes to maintaining our relationship. Today we are looking at the code, not codes, all of these codes, the code. I'm just going to give the code today. The code that covers up all of this code is important. Why am I saying that too many people are hurting? Because they are disrespecting some unwritten codes of conduct. Now, listen, whether you like it or not, if you see somebody, you are really, really close to a person, it might look somehow. And somebody has hurt the person you're really, really close to. Unwritten code of conduct. You must tread softly, you must tread carefully, else you'll be hurting the person you claim to love. It's an unwritten code of conduct. It's now left for you to either talk, you either become a middleman. Actually, it's even going to put you in a very tight corner. It's like having two friends fight and you are in the center. You are going to have to become a peacemaker where you have to try and balance it in a way that nobody will feel hurt in any way. Now, having said that, today what I want to talk to us about is the code of conduct. I call it the code of conduct. And that's that code that if you have, all other codes will work. If you have this code I'm going to be giving to us today, loyalty, respect, commitment, ability to balance when there are issues between two friends where you are in the center. When you have this code of conduct I'm going to be giving to us today, it will be easier for you to manage the relationship, balance it in a way where you are able to, at the end of the day, the Lord might use you to mend them, or you will be able to be in a position to take decision that will be healthy for the relationship, especially when the relationship is a very intimate one. Now, what is a code of conduct that when used, all the other codes fall into place? Open your Bibles to Matthew chapter 22, Matthew 22, and I'll read from verse 36 to 40, Matthew 22, 36 to 40. Somebody came to Jesus and asked, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" And Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself." Now, all the law and the prophets hang on these two: loving God and loving your neighbor as yourself. These two codes, love for God and love for your neighbor as yourself. Now, let's quickly look at the second one, why I made a statement I made earlier on. The second one says, you are to love your neighbor, treat your neighbor, expect from your neighbor what you would want for yourself. That is to say, whatever you don't want done to you, you must not do to another. So you don't want your spouse talking to his ex or her ex, then you too should make it a point of duty not to do that. Whatsoever, if you get hurt, having your best friend employ whoever you're working, whoever you sacked, then if it will hurt you, then you should understand that doing that will also hurt your friend. So the code of conduct is this: don't do whatever you cannot take. Don't give whatever you cannot take. Don't do to your spouse, to your neighbor, whatever you will not take. Don't do what you will not want somebody to do. Say, love your neighbor as yourself. That's one code of conduct that must be respected if you want to have a good relationship. You want to be able to balance and, make sure that you don't keep hurting people you're relating with. Having said that, I said I'm going to be giving us the code of conduct. The code. I believe that relationships are failing in this dispensation. Why? Because people have left the code I'm going to be talking about right now. They've left out this code in their approach to relationship. Now, when this code is lacking, all the other codes fail. Or people struggle to keep all of the other codes when this code is missing, is lacking. When people remove their focus from this code, is the code. It's like the code that controls all the other code. Call it the master code. The code that must be in place. When this code is in place, loyalty flows, respect flows, commitment flows, humility flows when this code is in place. And what is that code? Love for God. Love for God. Honestly speaking, in my mind, that's what is missing in relationships. You can't respect or have values if you don't love God. It is the love of God expressed in the fear of God that makes you live out the word of God, that enables you to create values that will now make it easy for all the other values, all the other codes of conduct to flow easily. Love for God is that code of conduct that all the other codes hinge on. Now, I want to say this: don't enter into any form of relationship with anyone who does not fear God, who does not love God, who does not have the thought of God in his or her imagination. You see, what is killing a lot of relationship is that people have broken the first code of conduct. And that first code of conduct is love for God. I want to talk about loving God is obeying his command, having him in your imagination where he is the one controlling factor. The truth is, until a person loves God genuinely, loving others will be an uphill task. In fact, it is impossible not to be wicked if you do not love God. Honestly speaking, anybody who doesn't love God can be mean. Anybody who lacks love for God can be disloyal. Anybody who cannot be loyal to God cannot be loyal to another man. So it is the love of God that constrains the human nature in us and puts a limit on our capacity to cause pain to others. Love for God. There's no limit to the magnitude of wickedness a person can do if the person does not love God. The love for God is a constraining factor. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 14 to 15. Please, I want us to open. That's what's missing. That is what is missing in this dispensation and in this generation. You can't have values when you don't value God. It is your value for God that helps you develop other values that makes you valuable. It is your value for God that creates or empowers you to create values that makes it easy for you to have a balance and have a code of conduct that will make every other value flow out of you easily. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 14 to 15. It said, "For Christ's love compels us." I'm reading the NIV version. The love of Christ compels us because we are convinced that one died for all. And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised. Now listen, when we are filled with love for God, the love of God compels us and helps us to be able to embrace all others, create values that will make it easier for us to embrace others and not hurt people. You see, the challenge we're having in relationship is that people are loving self more than God in this generation. The self-love is super high. The self-love is high. And when there's so much self-love, there will be no room for others. Because self-love is never contented. It keeps asking for more and more. And at the end of the day, there's no room for others. Self-love is selfish and cares nothing about the feelings of others. That's why he said the greatest. They asked him, what is the greatest commandment? He said the greatest commandment is that you love God, because love for God opens you up, gives you a large heart to be able to embrace others. The same way that God has embraced you. When you've experienced the love of God and you love God in return, you are empowered to embrace people like God embraces people. It makes you love people. You become a people. Your love becomes a kind of people-centered love. So loving God is paramount to creating conducts, relationship conducts that would make your relationship a glorious one. You see, when you love God, You find that you begin to function like Jesus Christ, just like Jesus feels the infirmities of others. Having a love for God empowers you to begin to feel for other people. You feel the pain for others. You feel what people feel. So before you act, you're already feeling the effects of your action on the other person. And that becomes a constraining factor on how far you would go to do whatever you want to do. Friend, you ask me, what is the conduct that produces all other conducts for a healthy relationship? I say it is what? Love for God. When you love God, you become selfless. The code of conduct for relationship and marriage, as far as I'm concerned, is loving God. If you don't love God, please don't think relationship. It won't work. You keep hurting people. People who don't love God have problem loving others. It is when we've experienced the love of Christ and we are able to love Christ in return, it becomes a constraining factor that helps us to love other people and treat them well and create values and respect the values, because the love for God keeps us humble. The love for God keeps us joyful. The love for God keeps us people-centered, because God is people-centered. And I want you to understand that relationship is all about the other person. When you build a relationship where you are more into making the other person happy and that person is into making you happy, there'll be no hurt, there'll be no pain. And I want you to understand that it takes love for God to make all the other codes of conduct fall in place. The question is, how much do you love God? When you love God, it tells you to build values. I've experienced that in my life, and it's easy to know when your love for God is even, maybe reducing and is shaking or fluctuating. You find that when your love for God is coming down, you become less tolerant of people. But when your love for God is all-time high, and you experience that overwhelming love of God, and you feel it and you love Him back, you find that you cannot make more excuses for people. You can love easily. You respect people. It's hard to love God and disrespect people. Very hard. It's hard to love God and be disloyal. It's hard to love God and not be faithful. You see, by the time you love God, when you are relating with people, it's not more about the people, it's more about God. When your code of conduct for relationship is love for God, I can guarantee you that loyalty will flow, respect will flow, faithfulness will flow, discretion will flow. You'll find, because you are all out there seeking for the best of whosoever you are relating with. Friends, if we must express and exhibit all the other codes of conduct where we are loving our neighbor as ourselves, where we are not doing things we don't expect our neighbors to do to us, then we must develop our love for God. And there's no shortcut in developing your love for God outside spending time with the Word, and not just spending time with the Word, but doing the Word. He said, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. And look at it, what are God's commandments? God's commandments are all of the code of conduct for relationship. God's commandments are all of the codes of conduct for relationship. So when you love God, you have that capacity to keep His word, every other thing will fall into place. Friends, I beg you, let's revitalize our commitment to God. Let's get relationships working in this generation. Let's put down this self-love. You love your, there's nothing wrong with love yourself, love your neighbor as yourself. But first and foremost, the greatest is loving God. Let's get to love God. When we love God, all the other codes of conduct just flow easy. We find ourselves not struggling to do it. I beg us, in this generation where self-love is all-time high, let's get back to the basic. Let's get back to the foundation of relationship. Let's go to the greatest code of conduct. Let us love God. Love for God empowers us to exhibit all the other values. It becomes easy to keep all the other rules and standards and run with the principles of loving people, being loyal, being committed, being discreet. All of this flows when we love God. Friends, love God. Honestly speaking, if you forget everything I've said, remember the code of conduct that makes all other codes work is love for God. Please, let's get back to basics. Let's start loving God so that we can be loyal, we can show respect, we can show love, we can show trust, we can show faithfulness, we can be honest with the people and transparent and have integrity with the people we are relating with. Let's love God so that kindness will flow, sensitivity to the needs of others and feeling of others will flow. When we love, humility will flow. I've not seen somebody who loves God and is proud. It's impossible to love God and be proud. No, it doesn't go together. You can't love God and not be discreet, because the love of God releases wisdom that helps you to be discreet. You know what to say, what not to say, when to be quiet and when not to be quiet. Love for God is what will help you to know what gift to even accept and what gift not to accept from your ex. I tell you, it gives you the wisdom to know the right thing to do. Please, let's get back to the basic. Let's get back to the basic. Let's love God. That's what's lacking in relationship these days. That's why we are struggling to keep all the other codes of conduct. It's impossible to love a man if you've not been able to love God. So let's get back and love God. And I believe if you can keep this code of conduct, love for God, every other code will flow. The Lord bless you. The Lord cause his face to shine upon you. The Lord establish you. The Lord engrace you to love him the more. In Jesus' mighty name. Amen.